welcome again to the Skill Work Forum. I'm Tim. As usual, I'm joined with my friend and my partner, Brett here. We gather on these podcasts and talk about industry issues, emerging trends, and challenges surrounding the skilled trade. So today we're going to kind of talk about a reality if you're in the business of recruiting, vetting, hiring new employees, which I assume all of you either are or maybe you're somebody looking for a job. So today we're going to talk about the fact that this whole thing is not an exact science. When you hire people, when you bring people onto your company, sometimes it just doesn't turn out the way that you expected or hoped it would or planned for it. And so despite our best efforts and your best efforts in recruiting and vetting great candidates, it's still possible sometimes to make a bad hire. In fact, I looked at some stats, Brett, close to half of all new hires fail within the first 18 months, and I would say it's probably closer to less time now. I think that window is shrinking. We thought we put together some signs of a bad hire. Some of these are pretty obvious, the old Captain Obvious commercial. Some of them may be a little bit more subtle, and it's interesting because last time in the podcast we talked about how to effectively onboard, and that if you effectively onboard people, it mitigates a lot of these. But so we came up with what we thought were 10 signs. Some of them are a little bit humorous, perhaps, but some of them not so much. But 10 signs that you may have made a bad hire, and maybe a few ideas on how to mitigate.
Yeah, I think so, Tim. I mean, it's like you said, we need talent, in our space, skilled trade talent. I think sometimes you can almost want to overlook the signs. Like you said, it's probably why it's 18 months when you probably should have been about 6 days.
8 weeks, yeah.
No, I know. You do have to have a level of patience. We talked about that in onboarding. You can't get too, sometimes I don't think you give a person time to settle in. So there is that piece. So the first one that we identified, and I think this is one that is probably one of the most difficult in the interviewing process, and that is the skills are not what you expected. What's really tough to figure out is some people are just really good interviewers, but as the saying goes, when you get them on site, they're kind of all hat, no cattle. It's something that usually shows up pretty quick. Ask that person to, wire a motor, and they've told you they're an electrician and they can't. That's a pretty good sign that maybe they embellished something on their resume, or like I said, they just were really polished, a good interviewer. There might be a reason they're a good interviewer, because they probably interview a lot, because they probably get fired a lot. But we see it. I mean, we have people, the ones that are hard to figure out are the ones that they're not great interviewers, but they're really good. They know their stuff. Trying to vet that out can be a real challenge.
Yeah, I was just thinking of this as you were talking about that, people not showing up with the talent that you thought. So just a real life story. This popped into my head, but I think I may have told you this before.
I know the story you're going to tell.
So I was actually looking to hire, and we were searching across the country. We were doing virtual interviews for this position. Very, very unique skill set. Very, very crucial to what we were doing. You had to really know this tool and this process very well. So trying to find the candidate was hard. And we finally found what we thought was a great candidate. We had a couple levels of interviews with this individual over a virtual interview. We could see each other like a Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
Guy was really on point, professional, knew all the answers, and I thought we had a home run. Moved him across the country, brought him in, whole 9 yards, paid to relocate him. Came in the first day, and I told my folks that he was going to be working with, I said, hey, I want to meet him, make him feel welcome the first day, so call me down, I'll come down in the foyer. So I went down, and the gentleman walked in. I'm like, I know you don't sometimes look the same on camera, but I said, that guy doesn't look like that guy at all. And then he starts talking, I'm like, doesn't even sound, this guy's got a pretty heavy accent. I'm like, I don't remember that. So I'm like, well, I kind of just walked him aboard and forgot about it. A few days later, I checked in with my one of my guys that was his supervisor. Hey, how's it going with Joe? We'll call him Joe. How's it going with Joe? And he goes, not great. He goes, I don't think he knows anything about this. I said, well, he's probably nervous. Let him get settled in. I'll check back with you at the end of the week. And he comes in at the end of the week. I remember I had to drive off campus for a meeting. I called him. He goes, this guy doesn't know even how to turn the thing on. And I mean, he knew nothing. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. He goes, no. And my guy was telling me, I started pressing him. And he admitted it wasn't him on the interview. It was a friend of his, did all the interviews. And he literally drove across country not knowing anything. So I said, well, I almost want to keep the guy just for his...
Oh, yeah, the boldness.
Just for the boldness. But I told my guy, I said, well, did you what did you do? He said, well, I fired him. And I'm like, well, yeah.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Guy had.
Just for the record, that wasn't skill work.
That was a skill work. That was a previous life. But I mean, I was like, couldn't believe it. The guy he didn't even know anything. That took the cake.
That's going over it's one thing to embellish a resume. You know, we college football coaches to it's things that people think won't get exposed. I mean, at some point they're going to figure it out. In the skilled trades, if you can't do it, and in that case, like you said, it's kind of crazy. Somebody be that bold to try that.
You hire guys like, hey, I need you to do PCL programming or PLC programming, and they walk in and they have no idea, never even looked at one. So that's not good. So that number one, I just thought of that story. The second one then of our top 10 is attendance issues. And what we hear from many, and I'm sure you guys are in the same boat, the idea of we just need them to show up. Just show up, be here when you're supposed to be here. So if you have somebody that you've hired and they start early on showing signs that they're showing up late, they call on last minute, they just don't show, or they have all these excuses why. And we have some people, and we call them red flags, you begin to see, and it seems like a common one was like, well, I was headed to the plant, but I had a flat tire. Okay, that can happen, but we've even had some that have had like multiple flat tires.
Yeah.
Like, well, what do we need to do to get you some new tires? Because the idea of not being there. So if you've got somebody you hired and they should be really on their best behavior early on, and if you made it clear that we need you to show up on time, it's crucial, and they're beginning to show attendance issues by calling in or not showing up. Again, now there are valid excuses. Sickness does happen. Mechanical issues do happen with your vehicle, but it's a trend to be watching for. So this is a sign you made a bad hire if they don't take attendance and being on time.
No doubt about that. A couple of these, like you said, these early indicators, you're going to have some grace initially. I mean, with anybody, obviously things can happen, but those reliability flaws that start to show up, they're hard to correct.
Yeah.
They usually don't go away. You hope at some point that individual will have a realization, whether it's sometimes the best thing you can do is fire them to give them a wake up to recognize that, this isn't okay. Just continuing to tolerate that is not good. So it's kind of the same thing. The third one is they're just a bad culture fit. So again, in that interview process, in that vetting process, no matter how extensive it is, and ours here at Skillwork it's a very extensive process for both internal and traveling guys that we put out in the field and ladies, but a bad culture fit. And so sometimes you get somebody in and you try to vet that out. You ask the questions, are they going to work well with other people? Are they going to this, or that? Here at Skillwork, we founded the company 3 very clear values: honor to God in everything we do, value and respect back to the trades, and to measure our success by the number of people we positively impact. If you don't fit that, you probably won't want to be here very long. Not because we're going to say mean things to you. You just you either fit into that. It feels right to be part of that. So everybody not fitting the culture and not being part of the team. That's another one that's hard to figure out in the interview, but you can start to see it pretty quickly once you're on site.
Yeah, and I think it goes to your onboarding and hiring processes too, to tie that into this, because how do you avoid that? Sometimes we get fixated on just the skills. Mm-hmm. And the experience, and it's really important that that needs to be kind of the entry level stakes to get in the interview. After that, you really ought to focus on those sort of things that are important to your organization. And a lot of times, if we don't have the right people in the interview process that are going to be working with them every day, you miss on those culture things, and it's crucial. It's really important. I would say that probably half of our what we call a negative outcome, when we have a candidate that's not a good fit somewhere, or because they don't fit in with your culture, with your team's rhythm and how you do what you do there. So it's really an important one. So those are the first 3. Number 4 then is kind of along with this, but it's really this self-important, really an arrogant attitude. And sometimes you have that candidate that shows up and they think on day one they know more than the guy who's been there for 20 years. And maybe they do know some things, maybe there's some knowledge that they can bring. That attitude, that know-it-all attitude, can put off your staff and can put off your team and can really make it very difficult for that individual to fit in. And people like this, often when new people show up, they're very nervous, and it's just human nature that some people cover up with nervousness and insecurity by coming on strong and overcompensating for that by appearing as though they know more than they know. So a lot of it has to do with the onboarding and talking to them and making them feel comfortable and not intimidated. Those guys that come in being offended at being corrected, I know everything, they won't take constructive criticism. Those people, like all of these, you need to coach and correct and try to help along. If that's going to be the way they are, ultimately that's probably going to cause you more headaches with your current staff than the problem you're trying to alleviate by bringing in someone new. So again, try to correct that, try to coach that, but the know-it-all, the self-important, arrogant worker, that's a sign of a bad hire, so that's number 4.
And all of these are, ones, as we're discussing here, you try to pick them up in the vetting interview process, but they're difficult. Like I said, what feels to be a strong level of confidence on the interview, then when you get them on site, maybe it is confidence, that's what you're hoping for, that they're very confident in what they do, very skilled in what they do, but if it turns into that arrogance or that almost a hero mentality, Pat Lencioni always says, hire, hungry, humble, smart. These people, they lack the humility, which can be a challenge. So another one, and it kind of fits in, a lot of these fit into similar personality traits, somebody that just continues to make the same mistakes. They're just not. This one can go two ways. You can say they're not learning. That may not be don't tell me what to do and arrogant like the one before. This may be an aptitude issue where we talked about it a minute ago, Tim. This having the skills to do the job is kind of that's a given, and we do here at SCORE, we do, I believe, a really good job of vetting the skills. It's these other pieces, what's your aptitude? We talk to clients all the time that would rather have somebody that has an upward growth curve. They learn, they're a quick learner, that type of thing, as to somebody where, hey, we've showed them this 5 times, and they continue to make the same mistake. That's a tough one, and one that at some point you got to give it some time. People are not just going to walk in. The difference between, we have it with our internal recruiters. The difference from a recruiter day one to once they've been here 6 months is night and day. So you got to give it some time, but they also got to be showing the ability to learn and not just repeating the same issues.
I was thinking about this one, and early on when we were first getting going and we were all trying to cover multiple jobs, and there was a period where I was a backup for somebody here that does some of our basic payroll and stuff.
So I remember those being very nervous days for me too.
Yeah, let's just say that I don't care how much time I spend with our great accounting back office team, I am not going to be good at that. I just don't have an aptitude for it. To me, close enough is good enough, but that doesn't work in the accounting world.
No, it doesn't. No.
So a good example of that, and we all have things we're good at, and you got it. Sometimes they're just not a good fit. So number 6, this kind of gets back to the personality, but we've all experienced that new employee that is, I call old job syndrome. This is the way we used to do it at my old job. You guys, the way you're doing it here is not as good. We did it better. And it constantly reminiscing about the old way that we did it. My boss didn't do it that way, or we didn't have our line set up this way, or our maintenance program was better at other place. You guys are doing it wrong. Kind of ties into that, that arrogance. But again, I think a lot of these are protection. The question is begged to ask is, well, then why did you leave? If it was so great, what was wrong with that? So somebody that tends to come in and disrupt your workforce and continually focus on that, I think this one can be corrected with just a little bit of coaching. Self-awareness. People just lack generally self-awareness, and somebody just making them aware of that this constant talking about your old place is not really setting well with the team here. Why don't you put that in the rearview mirror and work on? So the old job syndrome, that sometimes is a sign of a bad hire if they can't move past that.
You can't get past it. So yeah. I mean, we've all seen it. Those people that they just live in the past, and you got to really have people that are going to grow with your organization. But like you said, I do think that's a coachable thing. And if it's not, then you got to make the decision.
Back in the day, when you were been married a long time now, but back when you were dating, you start dating a girl, and all she wants to talk about is the old boyfriend.
That's a bad sign.
That's a bad sign.
So I've been married 31 years, and so if she's still talking about that, is that a bad sign?
That is probably a bad sign. Yeah, it's a bad sign.
She doesn't, but
she just got over that. She's doing good now.
We were having a conversation this morning. I said, I got podcast today, and I said, I've actually never watched one of our podcasts. She said, well, I haven't watched them either, so I can say whatever I want on here. So
I brought that too. Hey, check this out. She goes, oh yeah. Just say that we hope you guys watch it, but our wives aren't necessarily big fans. So.
She gets enough of me just straight face to face. The next one is
number 7.
A lot of the skill work guys that we send out into the field and gals, one of the big things we talk about is, are you willing to pitch in and get it done, whatever you need? Yeah, I know you're a PLC person or this, that, but if they, sometimes they're going to need you to, and those people that have that attitude, do I want to do that every day? This is my skill. I want them to utilize my talent. They didn't send me there to do X, this, but, I'm a team player. It really comes down to, are you a team player? If you're that, there's the saying, not my circus, not my monkey kind of a thing. There's people, unfortunately, they'd rather sit in the break room than help out. That's a sign, it's really an arrogance. It's a little bit of laziness. It's a variety of things. They're all things that clearly you've got to coach them out of them, or again, it's going to disrupt your culture. All these things that we're talking about here, if you accept them and you tolerate them, and you don't coach people up or coach people out, if that's what it takes, eventually it starts to erode your culture as the ultimate, impact.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things we found early on. We try to vet that out and put scenarios out there and see if the people are willing. And this is where reference checks really come in. Look at a previous employer and ask the question, were they willing to chip in when needed? When the chips were down. If you're in a production facility and the line's down, you got to have everybody willing to jump in and do what it takes. The whole idea that's not my job, and there's some mentalities that exist out there. It's just not good. So that's a sign maybe you got a bad hire, potentially something to work on. So number 8 then is a lack of attention to detail, and this really falls into safety issues, specific process that affects quality. I'd say quality and safety, and those are the two things where lack of attention to detail really can impact your product line, your customer relations, just the safety of your employees. So failure to adhere to protocols, to guidance and things that you put out, and most of these things have been vetted out for a long time, and they're in there for a reason. Again, if you have that person who's arrogant and doesn't want to listen or get offended if somebody corrects them, they may fall into this. A great example is, in a lot of our facilities, lockout tagout. If you don't pay attention to something like a lockout tagout process, that'll get you walked off out of the facility
real quick.
And it should. Because that's critical safety, and it's not that hard to do, but it's the impact if you don't do it is really high. And I also think that if you got a new employee and they're failing to follow these things and failing to adhere to them, that's going to start deteriorating trust, and the fact that now your supervisor or their new coworkers have to look over their work all the time and check it and make sure it's right. Well, you basically just defeated the purpose of bringing somebody new on, because now you've got them doing double work, maybe correcting work. So somebody that refuses to pay attention to key processes, it kind of goes back to your culture. If safety is a huge part of your culture, if we do things this way, it's important to make sure that they understand that and they're adhering to that. So that's number 8.
Number 9 is just a lack of drive and self-starting. So this is somebody, they just don't take any initiative. If there's a specific machine's down there, they're working on it, but when it's not, is this somebody that's willing to do the extra things, do what, keep themselves busy, maybe take that time to look through study the manual so that the next time, so really somebody that you don't have to constantly, if you're not telling them, okay, I need you to do this, this, and this, they just basically sit back and do nothing, or very little. It's just a lack of drive and that, willingness to be a self-starter. So I think it's another one of those that just to kind of, again, something you can set an expectation. A lot of these things are, what's the, if they see everybody else doing it, then that can kind of become a little bit of that tendency. So part of it for us as business leaders or maintenance managers in this case, maybe, it's setting that expectation and letting the employees know. But then if this person's kind of leads into the next one, if they're Tim will get the 10th one here, but if they're a person that's hard to find, and then that you can kind of start to figure that out. So
Yeah, I think that one that you covered there, Brett, that's kind of a pet peeve of mine. I want to see people that are willing to take ownership in what they're doing. And it's important that people are looking for constant improvement, self-learning, trying to get better. If that's not their attitude, that's one of the things we look at here, that if you're not a self-starter and willing to learn on your own, then probably not a good fit for us. So lack of drive is a big deal. So the last one, number 10, we call the incredible vanishing worker. So this is the person that just seems to, they should have been a sniper for the Marine Corps or something. They just kind of disappear. And where's Joe? Wasn't he just here a minute ago? They have an inordinate amount of time in the men's room, for example, and they seem to always be up to date on the latest news and information going on because they're spending time doing what they shouldn't do. And they always have a lot of excuses, and these people are really good at it because they always seem to have a viable excuse that's hard to disprove. But the bottom line is they're not there when you need them, invariably. And they tend to leave shifts a little early. They start a little late. Meetings that you need them at, they either show up late or they miss them, and they've got some critical thing they have to do. I was doing this, I was doing that. They tend to ask for a lot of time off, things that kind of tend to align with their priorities, or they just simply don't show up. So these kind of folks are really irritating because remember, number one is just show up. Mm-hmm. So if they do show up, but you can't ever find them, or they're off disappearing doing something, maybe a sign of bad hire.
Yeah.
So
well, and these facilities, we talk about on this podcast, 30 plus years in the manufacturing space, and a lot of these facilities that we send our folks out to, they're big facilities. It's pretty easy to hide. If that's your goal. And we hear it from folks is that is that type of thing. They're not where you need them when you need them, kind of a thing. That's usually a bad sign. They're kind of get into that habit. So those are the 10. There was all of these kind of feed in. There was a list that was kind of running. Saw it a lot on LinkedIn there for a while, and I pulled it up for this podcast. I think a lot of these things that we just talked about kind of fall into this, and so I'm going to read this list, and then we're going to let Tim kind of bring this thing home. But these are 10 things that requires zero talent. And if you think back, or you want to go back and listen to the ones we just said, so again, 10 things that require zero talent that you're looking for in your employees: being on time, work ethic, effort, body language, energy, attitude, passion, being coachable, doing extra, and being prepared. As we said before, the skills are the entry level. We can find the people with the skills. We're really good at that. This is the piece right here. If every person that we sent out, if they had 8 of these 10, if they would just, and it requires no education. This requires no education.
Yeah.
It's just things that if you bring these, you as an employee, and then for the employer, makes all the difference in the world in a culture and your opportunity for a skill worker specifically.
Yeah, I love that. I think those are great intangible qualities. It'd be great if we had a test that tested those things. The trick is, of course, a lot of these are really hard to uncover in a normal vetting process. So no one can predict with 100% certainty how a new employee is going to turn out. You just can't. But chances are, if you're seeing some of these signs, you may want to look at your hiring and onboarding and vetting process. We at Skillwork, this is what we do every day, all day. We vet great candidates. We're constantly honing our process. We're constantly trying to make sure the guys that we put out in the field in your facilities are the best. And we do spend a lot of time working with you to make sure we understand your culture, what sort of aptitude is required, what sort of intangible skills you're looking for. But even then, it's inexact. It's imperfect, and we don't get it right all the time. But we have a saying around here: if you're going to fail fast. And that is, if it's clear that you've done everything you can do, take steps to do everything you can do. But if it's clear that's not going to work, make a decision, make a change, and move on. Don't continue to pursue that bad decision. So a bad hire can cause you a lot more work for your team, for your staff, can be a detriment across the board. So watch out for these signs. But an old coach that I really used to like a lot used to say this: all sickness doesn't lead to death. Just because you're seeing some of these attributes or traits, it doesn't mean it can't be corrected. There's no replacement for just good coaching, good counseling, and good, clear, strong communication. Many of these can be reversed. As a matter of fact, most can be reversed. And if it doesn't look like they can be, again, make the decision to move on. Any final thoughts or anything you want to add before we wrap it up, Brett?
No, I think, like you said, I think it's a challenging thing. Dave Ramsey always says, sometimes it's unkind to be unclear. So I think, like you said it, Tim, you got to coach people up. You got to take the time. It's people are not, they're not just throwaway. So you've brought them in for a reason. You got to try to help get them there. You got to put them in the right culture. But then ultimately, you have to make a decision, like you said. Fail fast. If it isn't going to work, it isn't going to work.
Cut bait or fish.
Cut bait or fish.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you for joining us here on the Skill Work Forum. Hopefully these were helpful to you. Probably at some points a little bit, painful reminder maybe. But at any rate, we'll continue to try to bring good topics to you as we move forward in this podcast. Speaking of podcasts, we have another one at Skill Work here that we do focused on the skilled tradesman specifically, on the things that matter to them. If you're a skilled tradesman out there, things that might help you. If you're an employer out there, listening to the heartbeat, what your skilled tradesmen are saying. It's called The Proud Skill Worker. You can find that everywhere you can find podcasts. Come to our website, you can get it there. One of our director of ops leads that up, and they do a great job. So The Proud Skill Worker. We also want to mention our partners and friends. Texas Boys Outdoors is a great outdoor hunting and fishing show. They focus on helping the disenfranchised, disabled, marginalized, first responders, military. So they really just go all out to give opportunities for folks like this to get out in the great outdoors. Brett and I have had an opportunity to go down there and do a couple of episodes with them. Super great guys, Roy Crush and his team. So check it out. It's on the Pursuit channel, Texas Boys Outdoors, or you can YouTube and look it up, and be sure to support them as well. So until next time, thanks for joining us on the Skill Work Forum.